All right, in today's lesson, I'm going to address a few of the rhetorical strategies that are going to recur throughout English 10, but are specific to Act 3, Scene 2 of Julius Caesar. First and foremost, one of the things you need to consider as you're evaluating both Marcus Brutus and Mark Antony's speech is the speaker and their purpose and their intended audience. And these three right here have a great impact on the type of message that is being delivered. One of the lessons from these speeches is that understanding your intended audience is going to have a great impact on whether or not you're successful. So as you watch what happens to the plebeians after they listen to Marcus Brutus' speech versus what they do after they listen to Antony's speech, you'll see that Antony probably had a better understanding of his intended audience. That brings us to three appeals that I know you've learned in other English classes, and if you haven't, we're going to introduce them now. Emotional appeals, ethical appeals, and logical appeals. Basically, emotional appeals are the use of people's emotions to persuade them to do things. Fear is a really good one. Anger, making somebody feel that they're not good enough without a certain product. Happiness, this product will make you happy. Those are all emotional appeals. Ethical appeals always talk about a speaker's personal character. Like, you can trust me because I've proven to be trustworthy because I said so. Now, it's obviously not a logical appeal, but it is used in modern rhetoric and political and other discussions to this day. Then there's logical appeals, which means to use logic, reasoning, and proof to support your argument. That could be scientific findings, that could be evidence, it could be anecdotes, it could be claims, but the bottom line is that it has a nice flow to it. It's A to B, B to C, A, therefore C. Well, after reviewing those, one of the things that is worthy of note to go back into Act 1, Scene 2 is this word right here. A lot of students have never heard this word until they get to this point, which is called an anecdote, which is a short story meant to prove a point. In Act 1, Scene 2, Cassius tells a couple of anecdotes about Julius Caesar to make him seem weak. One of the anecdotes was about an alleged swimming contest that the two had, and Cassius ended up having to save him. And then there was another anecdote that Cassius told of Caesar, in which Caesar had a fever and had a seizure while he was in Spain, and he said, "Give me some drink, Titinius," like a little girl. Those are all anecdotes, and they're stories that are meant to prove a point. Some are more credible than others. I seriously doubt that Cassius and Caesar, the leader of the free world, had a swimming contest in the Tiber River. But anecdotes will recur, particularly in Mark Antony's speech we're going to evaluate. Another form of rhetoric is to organize things using compare and contrast. We're going to show this in Brutus' speech here shortly, but they also do the same thing in Mark Antony's speech. Then there's this particular verbal irony, and we're going to talk about tone as well. Verbal irony means to say one thing, but to mean its opposite. In Mark Antony's speech in particular, he says one thing, and then eventually he truly shows that he was implying the opposite of that, which then brings us to tone, which is the speaker's attitude. Mark Antony kept saying something over and over again. He kept repeating, he used repetition in his speech. And when he repeats this, you can tell that his attitude is that he is being verbally ironic, that he's saying one thing, but he is implying something very different. Another tone word that could be used to describe Mark Antony's speech in different parts of the story is, I would say, sad and angry. He speaks in sad and angry tones throughout his speech as well, which appeals to his audience. When he says something to the effect of, "My heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me." At that point, his tone is somebody who's either enraged and sad and is crying at the loss of his dear friend. So those are some examples of the terms that have occurred so far and things that you can look forward to again as you reread, do your close reading of the speech. But that takes me to another part then. Um, in our rhetorical devices, there are these things called logical fallacies that are basically lines of reasoning that are false. They appear to be logical, and people are stupid enough to follow it. And one of the big ones that I see nowadays is glittering generalities, which means to like give positive words to your argument that aren't necessarily true. I want to use an example from Act 3, Scene 1. Correct, yeah. So right after the murder of Caesar, both Cinna and Cassius start repeating the same type of words over and over again to describe what they did. Liberty, freedom, Tyranny is dead. Those are all positive words. Liberty, freedom, and enfranchisement, which means to give people the right to vote and to have rights and things like that. It's not murder. It's not killing. It's not overthrowing the leader of the world who was doing probably a good job. It's freedom. It's liberty, right? And at that point, I'm using verbal irony to imply the opposite of that. Another good logical fallacy that made its way in here was this one that is called circular logic. And in this scene right here, one of the conspirators says, "Yeah, someday we're gonna die. We know, and it's just time." And then Cass goes, "Yeah, but hold the phone here. If you kill somebody 20 years early, that allows them to not worry about death for the next 20 years, right? They don't have to fear death anymore." And then Brutus responds with, "Yeah, yeah. So when we killed Caesar, it was a benefit. That's why we're Caesar's friends. He no longer has to worry about dying because we took care of that." That is the perfect example of circular faulty logic because they start with a lie, and really the lie is, does Caesar fear death? He doesn't. It's stated in Act 2, Scene 2. But like, oh yeah, we did him a favor to make what they were doing seem positive and good. This is a review a little bit of then what some of the things that Brutus's speech had. Brutus's speech had some really cool rhetorical things in it, known as parallel structure, and I'm going to have to find it on the list here. So parallel structure right here, and I'm going to pick a different color, yellow. Parallel structure means to structure sentences in a consistent way that almost has a rhythm or a musical quality to it, and it makes somebody sound really smart, and it also is a good way to like organize your thoughts. So I'm looking at this particular section from Brutus's speech. "Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves than Caesar were dead and live all free men?" That's a perfect example of parallel structure because had you were living, pause, and die all slaves, then Caesar were dead, pause, and then to live all free men. This section right here, too, is another good example of parallel structure. "As Caesar loved me, pause, I weep for him. As he was fortunate," there's a pause there, "I rejoice at it. As he was valiant, I honor him. But as he was ambitious, I slew him." And even the next sentence is parallel structure as well. "There is tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honor for his valor, and death for his ambition." Once again, those are all really good examples of this musical structure, how the sentences work. There was always a pause right in the middle of the sentence, and one sentence lined up with the same structure as the next. And that's what parallel structure essentially is. So these are just some of the rhetorical strategies that are used in Julius Caesar, and they're things that you need to learn about because identifying them in Julius Caesar is kind of cool and important, and you're going to need to be able to do that for your performance-based task, especially when you write your parody of Mark Antony's speech to the plebeians. But at the same time, being able to detect this stuff in real life is just as important because you, at the end of the day, have to determine whether or not a speaker is credible or that you should or should not listen to the reasons and things that they're saying. And are you going to be duped when someone tells you an anecdote that isn't true? Are you going to be sucked in when they start using fancy and big words or wonderful parallel structures to get your mind to think a certain thing? And that's why we study these rhetorical terms, not just in the context of Julius Caesar at 3 Scene 2, but also for the greater context.